Hey guys, Frosty Knives here, and not with another book review, but now that this god-awful year is drawing to a close, I figured I would do a year-end review of all of the books that I've read this year. This isn't going to be a review of every single book that I've read, because I have read a total of 25 books this year, but I just wanted to show you guys what I have read since January until now. This is my 2020 Goodreads reading challenge, and these are all the books that I've read for that. And you can find all of these books on Goodreads of what I've read. You can find me on Goodreads as well. But for those of you that don't have it, or for those of you that just want to see it in video form, here we are. So this has been an interesting year. And we're gonna go through it. We're gonna walk through all of the books, and as you'll see, my reading taste is a little bit diverse. So I got them all stacked up here, and I hope they don't tumble. So we're gonna go here. I probably should have done this better, but anyway, here we go. So we started out strong in the beginning of the year. So the first book that I wound up reading this year started out the year with a little bit of fantasy, and I read the first book that I got of the Witcher series. I read Blood of Elves, book 1 or 3 or 2. I think there's a couple of books before this one. This is like book 1 of the beginning of the story. I think the first book or 2 that came out were short stories. But this is the first novel. So here we are, Blood of Elves by Andrzej Sapkowski. Hope I got that right. And I was very much into The Witcher at the beginning of the year, having played The Witcher 3 quite a lot, and still into The Witcher series and The Witcher lore and all that. And I have 2 other books that I have not read yet. But we started with this one, and this was pretty good. I really enjoyed it, having known some of the backstory and the lore already going into this. I was able to follow it pretty well. But this is a well-written book. Oh, it smells good too. And so there we are. That was book 1 for this year. And then, if you remember, way back in the beginning, I said that this was the year of the classics. This was the year that I was going to read all the classic books and stories and science fiction, horror, and whatnot over that I had missed. And that stood a little bit okay. That kind of went off the rails as the year went on. It really did. But we started doing that. We started doing the year of classics. And we did read a few classics this year. So it wasn't a total loss. So the next book that I read, which was a book I had never read before, was The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. And this is the Netflix cover edition. And the only story that I've ever read by Shirley Jackson was The Lottery, which I highly recommend. I highly recommend. It's a short story. It's very short. I don't even think it's a novella. It's just a short story. But it was really good. And this came, of course, this is very highly regarded, considered one of, if not the first haunted house stories written. And I think I went into this with too much expectations because it was good, but it wasn't what I expected. It got played up a lot over the years and the decades as being the quintessential haunted house story. Stephen King has talked it up. He modeled the Marston house in Salem's Lot after Hill House. He even quoted Hill House in Salem's Lot quite extensively. Shirley Jackson is one of his, favorite authors. One of the people he recommends a lot. And I think it just came to me I had so much expectation. And it wasn't what I expected. Not that it was bad. I will say one of the things that I liked about this book is that you're never sure of what's going on. Is it really haunted, or are the people in this story just insane? Is it all in their heads? So the book does leave you with that. And it leaves you questioning, is this a haunting or is this just mass insanity? Are they just crazy people? But I'd still read it. I would still recommend reading pretty much anything by Shirley Jackson. So that's where we went in the first book in the year of classics. And then the next book we went to was the highly regarded and highly reviewed The Exorcist. Yeah, I did a review on this one. I did a book review on this one, and you can find it on my channel. And this was an excellent read, as you would know. I talked a lot about it, and I really enjoyed it. And it follows very faithfully to the movie, and it's well written, and it's just an all-around good read. So William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist. And then I took a little break from horror and classics and whatnot, and I read a very tiny book by Ursula K. Le Guin, The Wizard of Earthsea, an old-timey fantasy book. And it's the first book in the Earthsea trilogy or series or whatnot. It was okay. I mean, it's old-timey. The language is a little old. Wasn't terrible, but I needed a palate cleanser after The Exorcist, and this was the palate cleanser. And then we jumped right back into the year of classics, and we went with The Omen. Dun, dun, dun. The Omen. And it's a tiny book. And it was okay, right? I mean, I was never a big fan of the Omen movies. Little Damien and his little Antichrist ways. If you've seen the movie, you've read the book. There's really not much difference between the book and the movie. It was very faithful adaptation. Actually, I think this is, and I think the reason for that is, this is a book of the movie. The movie came first, and this is the novelization of the movie. The terrifying new shocker of supernatural evil from 20th Century Fox. That would explain why this follows the movie so closely. But, nothing new. It was okay. If you like The Omen, you'll like the Omen book. And then, this is where things went sideways. The next book I read, because I had really wanted to read it, was Robert McCammon's Mine. Excellent book by an excellent author. But this book will go down as the book I was reading when the pandemic hit. So, when the pandemic hit, and we all went into lockdown, and we got sent home from work, and we got sent home to work remotely, this is what I was reading. I was about halfway through this book when the world decided to go all wibbly-wobbly and topsy-turvy. So... Not only will this, I will always remember this as being a really good book, and this is an excellent book by an excellent author. I highly recommend it. But this will always stay in my mind now forever as the book I was reading when the pandemic hit. Right? Kind of like, where were you when 9/11 happened? Where were you doing? What were you doing when COVID happened? What were you doing when the world went into lockdown? I was reading Mine. I had to finish Mine at home. When they sent us home for 2 weeks. Only going to take 2 weeks, and here we were. Here we are 10 months later. Anyway, so not that this is going to shift any of what I've read, but this is the point in the year where everything went, woo. That's an official word, an official sound, woo. So after that, I decided to take another palate cleanser, clear my head, and I read a graphic novel. I read Transformers, animated, The Arrival, graphic novel. Picked up a bunch of graphic novels at a yard sale or somewhere. I have a bunch of graphic novels just sitting around all over the place. So I decided to read it, a graphic novel, and there we are. We read that one. And that was pretty good. And then I decided, I'm going to read another graphic novel. So I read by Mark Miller, J.G. Jones, and Paul Mounts, Wanted, that graphic novel. And this is pretty good, very adult. So if you like adult type graphic content, this is very adult, very violent, very coarse language, all that fun stuff. So that was the next one that I read. And then I decided I wanted to read a hometown author, a Vermont author, and I had never read any of his work, so I dug into the bookshelf and I pulled out Joseph Citro's Dark Twilight. And I read that. And it was okay. Wasn't the best. Thank God it was short. It was okay. It's about Champ. Every Vermont author that writes a horror story has to write about Champ. Somebody's got to shoehorn Champ into his books, into their books. So this was okay. I wouldn't read it again, and I don't know if I'd recommend it, but it was for what it is what it was. And then we decided to do another Stephen King review, and I read Thinner, and I read and reviewed Thinner. So this is my British version of Thinner that I picked up at a yard sale. So I read and reviewed Thinner on the channel. So that was the next book that came down the pike. And then a book that I was going to read and review that I read but never reviewed, which is weird because I still got my notes on the book. Next book I read was Clive Barker's Books of Blood, Volume 1 of the Books of Blood. Decided I wanted to review some Clive Barker books. Then I never did. I read it, I reviewed it, I made some notes, still sitting over there, and never did a review on this. And I should, and I can, because I've got the notes. It's not like I need to reread it. I just got to read my notes. It's the first time I've ever taken notes when I've read a book for a review. So, highly recommend Barker. Highly recommend all the Books of Blood. Highly recommend all of the stuff that he writes. And then the next book I read, I don't have it because it's a library book and I had to send it back. But the next book in the list was another Joseph Citro book, and that was Shadow Child. And that was a lot better than Dark Twilight. It was almost as if both books were written by two different authors, even though they weren't. I read Shadow Child, and that was much better than Dark Twilight. So, if I'm going to recommend one of the two that I've read by him, it's going to be Shadow Child. And then I did a read and review of the brand new Stephen King book, If It Bleeds. That came out this year. And so 4 short stories, 4 novellas. And I did a read. I got this on Amazon. I did a review, and I posted it on my channel. So you can see it there. But we went and did another King book. This was pretty good. I like this one. Had a lot of good stuff in it. And then from there, I completely switched genres and read a book that I had on my shelf for a while that I wanted to read. And I read by Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child. I read Brimstone. It's a big book. This is 700 some odd pages. And it's a supernatural thriller. So it's a murder mystery. It's a murder thriller with supernatural elements. So you think this is about people who are being murdered by Satan or by a demon because of the way that these bodies have been discovered. It's very demonic, very ritualistic sacrifice type stuff. And then you go digging into it. It's really good. I would read more of this. I would read more of Preston and Child's books, because these series, apparently there's a whole bunch of these. There's like 15 of these, 15 or 17 of these in the series that follows Pendergast and FBI Special Agent Pendergast and his associate. And so, and there's a lot of these. And so, if you're into like mysteries and murder mysteries and thrillers and stuff like that, these are really well done. Even though it's 700 pages, it read pretty fast. So this was a good read. And then again, just completely random because I could. I read Dark Wars, The Tale of Meiji Dracula by Hideyuki Kikuchi. This is the Japanese Dracula. This is the Japanese version of Bram Stoker's Dracula. And, you know, it wasn't bad. It's nice to see how other people, other places, and other cultures do takes on classic stories. So this wasn't bad. It's a very short read. So I went and did that. And then, because this book had been sitting by my bedside literally for like 4 years, and I said, I'm going to read it one day. Well, this was this year. I read The Martian by Andy Weir. Finally, I know I'm late on the game on this one. Everybody else has read it, but I read The Martian, and it was good. It was different. It was a lot better than I thought. I didn't know what to think about a man who had been stranded on Mars and how he was going to survive on Mars. But it was really well written. And I enjoyed it quite a lot. So I don't know if I watched the movie, but the book was well done. So I really enjoyed that. And then I did a read and review on Stephen King's Cycle of the Werewolf. And this was when I realized I didn't own a copy of Cycle of the Werewolf, so I had to buy this off Amazon. Now I have it. And we did a read and a book review on Cycle of the Werewolf. And, you know, it wasn't a terrible book. Quite short. Got some nice photos in it. So we did that. And then I did a read and review on Gene Calagridis' Covenant with the Vampire. And an old vampire type story. And it's a trilogy, and I haven't read the other two in the trilogy yet. But I did this one, and this wasn't bad. It was as good as I remembered it. Reading it way back in the 90s, and I read it when it came out, and I read it again, and it's still good. So this was a good read. Eventually, I will probably get to the other two. And then, switching gears again, I went back to some graphic novels, and I read Ju-On 1 and Ju-On Volume 1. It's called Video Side, and Ju-On Volume 2. And these are the Ju-On graphic novels of The Grudge. We know it as The Grudge. So, this is the Grudge movies. And these weren't terrible. The horror, if you're into horror manga, these are pretty good. They're fairly fast reads. You know, they're just mostly pictures and whatnot, but they're pretty good. I've never read horror manga before, so I gave it a shot. Like I said, I got a lot of manga, graphic novels, stuff kicking around, so I enjoyed both of those. And then I decided to do another Stephen King read and review. Now we're getting towards the end of the year, and we did From a Buick 8. I did a reread and review of From a Buick 8, and it wasn't a terrible book. Not much more than I can say other than, you know, all of these read and reviews you can find on my channel. So if you want to know what I thought about those specific books, you could find them there. And then I went to a book that was recommended from a few friends and whatnot. My wife recommended it, so we tried. I went and I bought it. My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. I went into this thinking that this was going to be a horror novel, and I really believe it's a young adult novel. It doesn't say that it is, but it reads like a young adult novel. It's about four girls who grew up together, four 10th girls who are in 10th grade in the 80s, and one of them just happens to be possessed. Think Mean Girls meets The Exorcist, except it's more Mean Girls than it is The Exorcist. So there's not a lot of horror in here. It's just four girls who are growing up in 80s high school, and one of them just happens to be possessed. So it wasn't terrible. It's just I wasn't expecting what I got. I guess I was expecting more horror novel and less of a young adult novel, and I'm pretty sure this is a young adult novel. So, not that that's bad. It's just what I wasn't. I didn't know what to expect from this, although it has a phenomenal cover. I mean, the cover on this is just phenomenal, like an old VHS tape. And then I ended the year, or the last two books I read were books that my daughter got me for Christmas, and I had to read them immediately because they're Transformers related. So I got Transformers the Manga 1 and Transformers the Manga 2. And these are the collected manga works of the Transformers. There's 3 volumes. I got to buy the next volume, and then I'll have all 3 of them. But I read both of these immediately because I'm a giant Transformers fan, and I like them. These are good. And classic Transformers manga, now available in English for the first time. So if you're into manga, if you're into Transformers, and this is a must-have. And if you're into manga, definitely if you're into Transformers manga, this is a must-have. But if you're a big Transformers fan, I would highly recommend both of those. And that was pretty much the bulk of the whole year. That's what I've read, all 25 books on my Goodreads challenge. And now what I am reading, what I'm currently reading, and I don't know, this will probably get onto my my Goodreads book review of reading challenge of 2021. But I'm reading 2 books now. I'm reading Doppelganger, which is the book I got in one of the books I got in my book haul. I'm reading that one, and I'm also reading a book I just picked up the other day, or my wife picked up for me the other day, which was Secret Santa by Andrew Schaefer. Secret Santa. Christmas-themed horror story that takes place in the 80s. And so far what I've read of it, it is pretty good. Very Gremlin-esque. So I think I'm going to like that one. So these are the 2 books that I'm currently reading. All right, we talked for 22 minutes. Wow, that was a lot longer than I thought it would be, but that's okay, because that's what I do. I talk. So that is my 2020 review in book form. That's all the books that I have read in 2020. So guys, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you had a good and safe holiday. We're at the end of 2020. You can finally put all of this in the rear view. And we'll see what 2021 brings us. Thank you guys for going on this journey with me, watching my book reviews, following me on my book journeys and my book hauls and all of this stuff. Hope you guys are staying safe. Hope you guys are making the best of everything. And until next time, I will most likely see you next year.